Max wasn't mad about the Jeddah penalty. Well, kia ora, my name's Kimmy and I talk about Formula 1 in the world's second worst accent, and that might seem like I've just grown really long arms, but after reviewing some footage and contextualising it alongside Max's comments to the media after the race in Saudi Arabia this past weekend, I genuinely think his anger is more about certain other choices made by FIA officials rather than so much the penalty itself. So we all know the story by now. Oscar gets a great launch off the line, so much so that I genuinely thought he jump-started and had to roll back the footage a couple of times. Max gets a bit bogged down, seems to struggle in the second phase, and they both go hot into turn 1 with Oscar marginally ahead. Which meant Max had two options: back right out of it and risk losing an extra place to an opportunistic George Russell, or cut the corner at a point that is a pretty notorious bottleneck. Now, in fairness to Max, Oscar very nearly did go all four wheels off the road, and I imagine from the cockpit it would have been easy to make that leap. Unfortunately for Max, Piastri just kept the tyres on the right-hand side of his car within track limits, and he did make the corner legally. After the race, Christian Horner pulled a Toto Wolff. I have it printed out. And showed up to do media with an image of the incident printed out on actual paper to try and argue the point. If I remember correctly, that's not the first time he's done that. The steward's decision, however, seems to hinge on the belief that Oscar was the chasing car and that he had the right to the corner due to having his front wheel alongside Max's mirrors going into turn 1. The reality is that due to the close nature of the start, either car at any point could have been considered the overtaking car and thus entitled to the space. To say otherwise indicates that whoever starts in second is always going to get priority into that corner. The stewards decided that Oscar was the one who was performing the overtake, but if you take it back a few seconds, the opposite could also be true. Both of them were coming in way too fast into the corner to make it cleanly without either colliding or one of them going off the track. And because Max was the one on the outside, he was the one who had the unfortunate privilege of cutting the corner. And had Oscar started on pole, I am pretty sure the outcome probably would have been the same, just with him being the one going off the road. And this is the nature of the Jeddah Corniche circuit. A short run up to turns 1 and 2 with a tight walled chicane and no way for the car on the even numbered side of the grid to go over an inside curb and give the driver on the right a little bit more space. Unless your opponent gets a really abysmal launch, it's really hard to stop this from happening. At the time, Red Bull decided it was more beneficial to risk the penalty than give the place back, and there was more opportunity to make up time in the clean air than there would be in Piastri's wake. However, if the issue was so clear-cut, why didn't race control instruct Max to give the place back during the safety car period? This is something the race director has the power to do, after all. And I imagine this is something that was going through Max Verstappen's mind when he was told he had a 5-second penalty. Unless the move's not on in the most egregious of manners, Red Bull is never ever going to give up a place voluntarily. So he's already annoyed because he thinks Oscar came in too hot and gave him nowhere to go. He's possibly thinking he could have won the race if race control had told him to give the place back in the first place, and then this happens. Ben Sulayem goes up to Max and says something that Max seems to be having absolutely none of. A few moments later, David Coulthard gets a 2-line Parc Ferme interview, and from then on out, Max refuses to talk about the penalty at all. Now, unless somebody who is right there in the vicinity of Max and MBS talks, we'll never know the exact words that were exchanged between them. However, it's not hard to make a few leaps and come to some conclusions. But if MBS did remind Max of the rules around criticising stewarding decisions, then it's backfired. Because all it's done is empower Max to reignite the conversation around the apparent gag order that's been placed on the drivers and how absolutely incredibly messed up it is. This is basically the sporting equivalent of it being made illegal to criticise your government under fear of retaliation. And we all know that's always a great idea. Healthy. Not messed up at all. There's people on both sides of the penalty divide, and some are saying it's racing, that it's the first corner, that both drivers were going for it and these things happen. Some are saying that Max should have been punished even more severely, with Giancarlo Minardi saying he should have been given a drive-through. Desperately trying to keep yourself relevant there, bro. Personally, I think those who think his penalty should have been harsher are really just demonstrating exactly how much they hate Max and are showing their whole asses. And what's my opinion? Oscar had the corner. Only just, but he had it. Race control should have just told Max to give back the place. But at the end of the day, I'm actually glad that they decided on the penalty, because Max continuing to highlight this governance issue is really damn important. Contrary to some reports, racefans.net, I'm looking at you, Max Verstappen did in fact swear when he was informed of his penalty on the team radio. It's just that rather being an F-bomb like it initially appeared, it was the most innocuous expletive of all time. Bloody. A swear word so mild that here in Australasia we've been routinely using it in anti-drink driving campaigns on everything from TV and radio to roadside billboards since the 1980s. Cultural differences, I guess. So this time it definitely was not a case of the broadcast directors manipulating the narrative, not unless someone is editing the driver cams with AI-generated radio replacements anyway. However, it does give us an insight into what might be on that list of banned words. You know, if there even is one, or they're just making it up on the fly. Next time, Max, you should say bugger in a press conference. I dare you. The only good thing that came out of Sunday for Lewis Hamilton was the fact he probably helped secure his teammate's podium by playing DRS chicken with Lando Norris, which has to be cold comfort when you're finishing over 30 seconds behind said teammate. And as I always have to caveat before discussing anything to do with Lewis Hamilton that might not be 100% glowing praise, I have been a fan of Lewis for close to 2 decades. But his attitude when he's struggling is annoying. It's the same criticism I have of Lando Norris, blaming himself in a self-deprecating manner in a way that feels to the viewer like fishing for something, while subtly implying that a few things are rotten inside the house. Now that might not be intentional, and to be completely honest, this piece of Lewis's personality is part of why I find him an interesting guy, but I think it's reached the point in the season where he needs to take a leaf out of the dude he's replaced's book and be realistic. And it must be hard to be a 7-time world champion who has all these expectations loaded on him thanks to being a part of the biggest F1 deal in history. However, saying you need a brain transplant is next level defeatism. None of these outcomes have been helped along by Ferrari's early season claims that Charles and Lewis have complementary driving styles. They tried to gaslight the entire F1 fandom by waxing poetic about how their driver pairing would work together in symbiotic perfection, when the reality has been, well, the exact opposite. Sure, both of them like to go late on the brakes, but Charles very much prefers a car with a loose rear end that he can control from the front with very smooth inputs, whereas Lewis is much more inclined to rely on rear stability and confidence that he won't lose the back end under his aggressive approach to steering. When it comes to the balance of the car, you kind of can't be much more opposite than that. Combine this with the brakes being completely different and the engine being one Hamilton also hasn't used before, and there's a whole lot of adaptation that requires a huge shift in driving philosophy and a requirement to pretty much overwrite muscle memory that you've relied on for well over a decade. And unlike Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton hasn't had the constant pressure to adapt to a new team and a new car every few years of his career. Sainz knows it takes time. Williams is his 5th team in 11 seasons. He's gone through this a lot. Lewis has only ever known 2 teams since 2007, and rather than take a step back and set an achievable path towards adapting to the car and finding small improvements to help everything converge in a reasonable time frame, it feels more like he's admitting defeat until Ferrari finds a magic fix that will give him the confidence he needs. Now, this being Ferrari, let's be honest, this attitude may very well be coming down from the top, an expectation that the guy you just dropped hundreds of millions of dollars on to come out of the gate swinging. That's the hallmark of a team who still thinks it's the pinnacle of Formula One, despite not having won a Constructors' Championship since 2008 and a driver's title since the year before that. You'll always wonder if behind closed doors, Lewis has been made to feel like he's letting down the entire nation of Italy. Which, like, sure, hyperbolic, but you wouldn't put it past them. Ferrari's not exactly going to bin Lewis off if it takes him 10 races to get up to speed. Even if it takes him all season to get a handle on things, they're not going to get out of a contract this big, and they're not going to want to fire the most successful Formula One driver of all time. So even if at the moment it seems like Lewis is going backwards, the best thing everyone can do, including Lewis himself, is give it time. So what did you learn from the 2025 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix? Do you think Lewis is done burger? Do you think Max deserved to be disqualified for racing into the first corner? Maybe you even think Max really did say "really" over the radio instead of and the rest of us are suffering from a collective delusion? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video if you want YouTube to recommend my videos when I post new ones, because if you don't, chances are you won't see when I post without clicking on your subscription feed, and nobody does that. My Patreon is down in the description box below. Thanks so much for watching, and final thoughts. This little angry French dude is fast becoming my favourite rookie. Look at him. What a ledge.